All right, today we're diving deep into the microscopic underworld. We're going to pull back the curtain on a pretty infamous family of organisms, the gram-positive bacilli. And trust me, these tiny rod-shaped culprits have had a massive impact on us, causing everything from historical plagues to very modern-day food poisoning. So let's go ahead and meet the suspects.
But first, let me ask you a question. What in the world could possibly connect the terrifying threat of bioterrorism with, say, a case of food poisoning you got from last night's takeout? The answer isn't a person, and it's not a place. It's a very specific category of bacteria.
And that's our answer right there, gram-positive bacilli. Now I know, it sounds super technical, right? But it's actually pretty simple. They're just bacteria that are shaped like little rods. And the whole gram-positive thing, that's just a label they get from a lab test called a gram stain. You can think of it as a way for microbiologists to identify the usual suspects. And believe me, this family has some truly notorious characters.
Our first suspect in the lineup is a real historical heavyweight, a toxin-producing titan behind a disease that people once absolutely feared. Let's take a closer look at Corynebacterium diphtheria. Think of this as the suspect's rap sheet. So C. diphtheriae are these little club-shaped rods, and they don't form protective spores. When you look at them under a microscope, you'll often see them hanging out in V or L shapes. They spread pretty easily through respiratory droplets, coughs and sneezes. But their real weapon, the thing that makes them so dangerous, is a powerful poison they produce called an exotoxin.
So how does this whole attack play out? Well, first, the bacteria latch onto the lining of your throat. Then they start pumping out that powerful toxin. This poison gets to work killing healthy tissue, which then builds up into this thick, gray, nasty layer called a pseudomembrane. As you can imagine, this can make it incredibly hard to breathe or even swallow. And it gets worse. If that toxin gets into the bloodstream, it can cause devastating systemic damage to your heart, nerves, and kidneys.
But here's where the story of diphtheria takes a much more positive turn. See, we have an incredibly powerful defense against it: routine immunization. The diphtheria vaccine is honestly one of the great public health victories of the 20th century. It's made this once deadly disease pretty rare in many parts of the world. A real win for science.
Okay, let's shift gears now. We're moving from a major historical threat to something a little closer to home. Our next two culprits could literally be hanging out in your kitchen right now.
First up, we have Listeria monocytogenes. Now, what makes Listeria so uniquely dangerous is that it actually loves the cold. While most bacteria slow way down or stop growing in your refrigerator, Listeria is perfectly happy. It thrives in those temperatures, which makes it a really sneaky and persistent threat in our food. So, just how common is this stuff? Well, this number is a pretty stark reminder. Studies have estimated that anywhere from 15 to a whopping 70% of some raw foods, we're talking vegetables, unpasteurized dairy products, and meat, can be contaminated. That really just shows you how widespread this bacterium is in our environment.
And our second kitchen culprit is Bacillus cereus, famous for causing what some people call fried rice syndrome. And this quote really explains why. This bacterium creates these super tough spores that can easily survive cooking. So if that cooked rice is then left at a warm temperature for a while, say on a buffet line, those spores can wake up, germinate, and start multiplying, producing toxins that'll make you sick.
So let's put these two head to head. For Listeria, its key trait, its superpower, is its ability to grow in the cold. For Bacillus cereus, it's all about those incredibly tough, heat-resistant spores. You're more likely to find Listeria in things like soft cheeses or raw deli meats, while Bacillus cereus is the classic culprit in cooked rice that's been left out too long. And while really anyone can get sick from Bacillus cereus, Listeria poses a much more serious risk for vulnerable groups like pregnant women and newborns.
Okay, now it's time to turn to maybe the most notorious member of the entire Bacillus family, a name that makes headlines and has a pretty scary reputation: anthrax.
Bacillus anthracis is another large rod-shaped bacterium, and just like its cousin, B. cereus, its secret weapon is its ability to form these incredibly resilient spores that can survive in the environment for decades, even centuries. It's mostly a disease found in animals, like cattle and sheep, but its potential to be used as a bioterrorism agent is what makes it so infamous to us. The way anthrax attacks is actually pretty sophisticated. It uses a three-part toxin in a coordinated assault. First, you have the protective antigen. Think of this as a master key. It basically picks the lock on a human cell and opens a door. Then, through that door, the other two toxins sneak in. The edema factor causes cells to leak massive amounts of fluid, which leads to all that swelling. And the lethal factor, well, it's as deadly as it sounds. It goes in and completely shuts down the cell's internal machinery, causing it to die. It's a brutal and effective attack.
All right, for our last section, let's meet a totally different kind of criminal, the opportunist. These bacteria aren't usually a threat to healthy people. Instead, they just hang around, waiting for an opportunity, like an injury or a weakened immune system, to strike.
Two key players here are Actinomyces and Nocardia. Actinomyces israeli can cause these really deep, painful abscesses, often in places like the jaw, they call it lumpy jaw, or even in the lungs. Then you have Nocardia, which you find out in the soil and water. It typically infects people whose immune systems are already compromised, getting in through the lungs or a cut in the skin. Both are a great reminder that sometimes the biggest threats are just waiting for us to be vulnerable.
So, after running through this whole rogues gallery, what are the big takeaways? First, these bacteria are defined by what they do, whether it's producing a deadly toxin or forming nearly indestructible spores. Second, their environment is absolutely key. Knowing that Listeria thrives in the cold and Busius loves warm rice helps us understand how to avoid them. And finally, and this is the most important point, we can defend ourselves. Science has given us amazing tools, from vaccines to simple food safety knowledge, that help keep us protected.
When you step back and think about it, these tiny little rods have had a huge impact on human history, driving everything from devastating plagues to modern public health crises. And that leaves us with a final thought to chew on. As our world keeps changing, which microbe is going to be the next one to emerge and define our future?